This episode of Happiness on Tap contains discussions about childhood sexual abuse and trauma recovery. While our conversation is focused on healing, empowerment, and hope, some content may be triggering for listeners. Please take care of yourself and prioritize your well-being. If you need support, consider pausing this episode and reaching out to a trusted professional support network. Welcome to the Happiness on Tap podcast. I am your host, Leanne Herron, a former accountant and paralegal turned certified life and holistic health coach. This podcast is your go-to podcast for uplifting conversations that stir the heart and ignite the spirit, where we bring you inspiring stories and practical insights for a happier, more fulfilling life. So let's get started. Today, we are diving into a powerful and transformative conversation. Our guest is the incredible Rachel Grant, a disruptor of traditional modes of healing, creator of the Beyond Surviving program, international speaker, podcast host, and sexual abuse recovery coach. Rachel holds an MA in counseling psychology and is the author of Beyond Surviving, the Final Stage in Recovery from Sexual Abuse. Since 2007, Rachel has helped countless survivors of childhood sexual abuse who feel broken and unfixable reclaim their lives and break free from the pain of their past. Rachel, thank you so much for being with us here today.
My pleasure. So wonderful to be connecting with you here today, Leanne. And hello to everybody tuning in and listening. Glad you're here as well.
We're excited to have you. I'm excited to have you. So let's jump right in.
Yeah.
The journey to Beyond and Surviving. Let's start at the beginning. Can you share a bit about your personal journey and what led you to create the Beyond Surviving program?
Thank you, Leanne. Well, like so many things in life, it wasn't planned. That's for damn sure. In my own kind of life, focused on things like, being an educator and working in elementary schools and being a nanny and these kinds of things. But at a certain turning point in my life, it became clear that I needed to do some really important healing work. And then that eventually, overflowed into the work that I'm now doing with others. So, if we go a little bit back in time, I grew up in Oklahoma, so I'm a country girl through and through. And like when I was about 5 years old, my grandfather came to live with us. And I was actually really excited about that, Leanne, because my brother and sister were much older than me, 8 and 9 years older. So by 5 years old, they were teenagers. They were doing their own thing. They were, not really interested in hanging out with me anymore. So my grandfather became a captive audience, if you will. I would rush home from school and kind of go straight to his room and we would play and talk and color and we spent a lot of time out on the front porch sitting in the country. And I was really appreciative of his attention and his companionship, and I felt, just really safe and nurtured by him. And then when I was 10 years old, one day he was heading out onto the porch, and so I jumped up like I usually do and to open the door for him. And I actually didn't wanna go out on the porch that day. I was watching my little TV shows, and so I started to go back into the house, and he kinda gripped a hold of my arm and, motioned for me to come sit with him. So, I didn't think anything of it, right? We'd sat on the front porch 100 times before. I was sad to miss my shows because back in the day, right, nobody no pause and rewind, you miss it, you miss it. But, I did, we went and sat, and he always had this, like, orange fuzzy sweater that I just loved, and so I would, like, snuggle up. I was super cuddly as a kid with my mom, my dad, just anybody who would take it. I wanted to be cuddled up. And so we snuggled up on the porch swing and started chatting. And then I started to feel his hand reaching around and grabbing my breast, which I was 10 years old. So, starting to develop, but not much. But still, I had a sense that, this was a different part of my body. not a lot of sex education, you know, in the 70s and 80s in Oklahoma. So we didn't talk about things like body safety and consent and abuse and all of those kinds of things. But I did feel uncomfortable. And so I started to kind of try to wiggle my body and, you know, kind of move away. And he kind of gripped me tighter, which at that point I did feel afraid and really confused and dissociated. I didn't know that's what I was doing then, but of course that's what happened. Just remember feeling kind of floaty and weird. Eventually, I kind of snapped back to it and I was able to kind of jump up and get away. And I ran to my parents' bedroom. There was this space between their bed and the wall, and I remember just curling up in that little space and feeling all the feelings, confused, scared, sad. And it's always so profound to me to think about how very quickly the mind starts to try to make sense of the experiences that we have. So right away, I started having immediate, you know, thoughts about like, what was that? And did I cause that? Was that bad? Was that okay? What's wrong with me? Why did he do that? Did I do something bad? You know, all of those thoughts just started kind of swirling, you know. And I eventually, you know, kind of gathered myself as we do, right? We like, okay, I guess I'm just going to pick myself up off the floor now and, you know, went into the living room. And I remember really profoundly, like the next day at breakfast, my mom noticing that I looked down, that I looked different. I was always kind of a very bubbly, silly, goofy kid, and asking me, like, are you okay? And in that moment, really feeling the tension of, do I say what happened? While realizing I don't even know what the words are to use to describe what happened. Or do I not tell? Because on one hand, all I had was this sense that like something bad had happened, and maybe I had done something bad. And all I knew on my in my child's mind was when you do bad things, you get punished. So I was like, I don't want to get punished. So no, I'm fine. Like I just want more syrup for my pancakes. And like just like that, this disconnect of self happened, right? Where now there's this me who's having this trauma and this abuse happening. And then there's the me that is masked and pretending and just, you know, kind of getting through the days. So the abuse continued on for some time and escalated until one day my mom just happened to walk by the window that looked out onto the front porch and she saw him touching me. And woo she came blazing out onto that porch, Leanne, like a mama bear, right? Though it was scary to me as a 10-year-old because I didn't understand, like, you know, what was happening. And I thought she was angry and mad with me, right? Because she kind of addressed me, like, Rachel, get in the house, you know, get over here. And that was actually, you know, kind of a place where I did think, oh gosh, I am the one in trouble, right? As a kid. And I had to work to kind of unravel that in later years. Of course, with perspective understanding that she was scared and she was upset and she was angry. She just wanted to get me away, right? And protect me. So my mom and dad were very responsive in that they moved my grandfather out of the house. Like within a day, he was gone out of the house. Um, and you know, they tried to get me into counseling, but I went to like one session and unfortunately had one of those counselors who asked all the wrong questions. And it was a guy. I was like, what are you doing putting this 10-year-old, you know, kid with a, you know, grown man, and just so uncomfortable. And, you know, the stereotypical things like, why did you go out on the porch again? Why were you wearing tank tops? Like just all of the dumbass things that untrauma informed people and, you know, counselors and therapists would say. So I started running away to the woods. I was like, you're not getting me in that seat again. No way, honey. So I just, you know, bolted, and, you know, they kind of surrendered to that. Um, so while my grandfather was out of the house, it really still left me with all of the impact and not knowing like what to do with it and how to make sense of it. So my teen years were just fraught with the, you know, impact of trauma, feeling worthless, feeling unlovable, trying to figure out like where, you know, what's my sexuality, you know, and all of that piece of the puzzle, having a hard time trusting people. And then when I did go away to college, I met a boy and we started dating. And within a few months of that, I disclosed that I had been sexually abused. And he really began to encourage me to go to therapy, try it again, and try to address it because I could see that within even the context of the relationship, even in the early days, like I don't know what I'm doing here, and there are challenges that are happening between us because of the trauma. So I did start doing some therapy. Unfortunately, that relationship devolved soon enough into emotional and verbal abuse, later on physical abuse. And I spent 10 years with him, 3 years of that married to him. So it was this wild moment in time in my life, Leanne, because I was trying to heal from this childhood trauma and other traumas that had occurred in my teen years while in a relationship being abused. So it was just a mess. It was a mess. Like there's no way to say it any nicer. It was just messy. Eventually, when he and I separated, that was that moment for me. I was in this new apartment all by myself, kind of wondering, what the heck am I doing with my life? Feeling really vulnerable and insecure about my future. And I remember just having this crystal clear thought of like, Rachel, you have got to get your shit together, like right now, or you are going to spend the rest of your life just surviving, just white knuckling it through in the ways that you have been. So that was really the moment where I just said, okay, I'm going to figure this out. So I started reading a lot, kind of that stage of becoming very book smart about trauma that we all go through, right? and but I knew because of my failed experiences in therapy and my frustration in therapy that I didn't want to just have an understanding about trauma. I really wanted to understand, what do I actually need to do to shift and to change, what's going on for me. And my background, as I said, is in education. So I also think often through the lens of like curriculum and scaffolding learning and like, what are the assignments? What are the steps? How do we acquire new information? So that really informed and influenced how I approached my own healing. I did my master's, and honestly, I was again just trying to get myself together. I didn't even have an eye to like, this is what I'm going to do for work, or, begin to reach out and help other people. But as things began to shift in my life, I did start to get kind of curious, like, I might be onto something here. And I wonder if this would help other people. So in 2007, I did kind of like I had some women who were my guinea pigs, quite honestly. Like, I don't truly fully know like if this is going to help you or not, but we kind of went through what was, the earliest version of, Beyond Surviving, and it did have an impact. And so I said, all right, let's try this. Let's see if I can develop this further. And so now, 18 years later, here we are. And I work with people all over the country, all over the world, who are really at that place in their process and their healing where, yeah, they've kind of tried everything. They have a good sense of what's going on, but they're feeling very kind of blocked and frustrated because the full shifts aren't really happening for them.
Oh my God. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. You covered so many things that I personally can relate to, which is why I connected with you and wanted to reach out to you after the summit we were on together. You hear the things that you need to hear at the time you need to hear them. And so I definitely, that was my kind of call to work through some things that I still hadn't worked through. Like I was learning how to survive and grow at the same time and just trying to understand what had happened. And I'm like you, I throw myself into education. The more I can learn, the better off I am. But books were only doing me so much. I really needed that human connection to
Mm,
also help me not feel so alone in my wanting to figure this out. But I
yeah.
knew that other people had to be going through what I was going through. And so, when I launched my coaching business, the one thing I wanted to do was to reach out to all the people who helped me when I was in trauma. other alternative medicine practitioners that help me get my nervous system under control and teach me different healing modalities.
Mhm.
And connecting with them and inviting them to be on my podcast and being able to spotlight all of the valuable resources that are out there for people. That is so important for me because I wish I had had that knowledge.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I can relate to that. Yeah, thank you. I think it is. It's, there are things along the way. All of it plays a part in our process, in our healing. And then finding, the mentors and the guides that just kind of help us click things into place, I think is just so important. So thank you for creating a platform where you get to highlight and people can come and learn because, we all have different entry points into our healing journey. For me, one of the biggest things that made a difference was as I began to understand the neuroscience of trauma. Like that really is a strong lens for me in my own, life and in the work that I do, because what I started to understand is that this abuse was like an injury to my brain, an injury to my nervous system, and uh, injuries can be healed, right? And so that really shifted things because I moved out of this place of like, oh, I'm just a mess. Oh, I'm just, damaged. Oh, I'm, this broken person to no, I'm somebody who's been injured. And then I can understand the things that will help that injury to heal and then start to take action and apply, those sorts of things. So that has just been a big shift for me, such that I really started to understand like trauma is not a life sentence. It's not like if you think about it, like if you break your leg, you don't sit there and go, well, I guess I gotta live with this broken leg for the rest of my life, right? No, like you heal the leg, the bones heal and you do the things and the PT. So similarly with trauma, right? We don't have to be stuck in that phase of like recovery for the rest of our lives. And that's really where the concept and idea of beyond surviving was born out. Honestly, I was in a like a workshopy thing. We were creating like a community event, and I wanted to do a panel of people who were going to speak on, healing and sexual abuse, and I just couldn't think of a title for the event. So I was brainstorming this with one of the guys in the program, and I was telling him a little bit about why it mattered to me and my story and background. And he says to me, Leanne, well, I'm not really sure what to call this event, but gosh, I just have to say, Rachel, like you're such a survivor. You're just so strong. You've just been through it all and you've just kept going. And on that day, I was not having it. I didn't want to be a survivor. I was like, are you kidding me? Like, and it just popped out of my mouth. I was like, I am so sick of being a survivor, right? I really just want to live my life. Like there has to be something beyond surviving. And Annie starts laughing at me, which, that's the worst thing in the world when you're having a moment and somebody starts to giggle at you. But he says, Rachel, I hear you. And I think you just found a title. So, that is the heart and soul of my work. I really want people to understand that they get to move on, they get to thrive. And I think of Beyond Surviving as like one part trauma healing for sure and integration, but then one part a little bit like growing up and understanding how to be in your empowered adult self. Because, yes, life will happen, things might pop up, but as they do, how do you respond in those moments is really what becomes so critical. So, really getting to help people, learn those things and to step out into their lives. And it's just amazing what people are capable of and what they can create in their lives when they're no longer seeing themselves through the lens of that abuse and that trauma.
Absolutely. And, for me, I had no knowledge, no direct knowledge of how the body hangs on to trauma. I didn't
Mhm.
understand neuroscience or my nervous system or any of that until I was in that time where I couldn't understand how I shifted from being this on top of everything, able to multitask, able to just push down whatever trauma had happened in my life and just kept on going.
Yeah.
Luckily, I felt like I had this amazing resilience to be
Hmm.
able to, even after having my ex-husband have an affair 2 months after our son was born. And I remember just trying to shut down for a minute And my daughter was like 8, and she just stood by the side of the bed and she's like, Mom, you got to get up.
Mm,
Like,
mm.
the baby needs you. I need you. I need to go to school. We need to eat. Like, Mom, you gotta get up. You can't stay in bed. And
Wow.
that was enough, thankfully, for me to be like, you're right. Like, I
Mm,
have you guys. I have to take care of you. I
yeah.
can't just let what he did take me down. And I'd always been that way,
Mm,
just
mhm.
resilient, resilient, resilient until I wasn't. And then I was like,
Sure.
what the hell is this? Like, I had never had
Sure.
these feelings, and my brain was just jumbled, and my memory was gone, and I was having fear and panic attacks. And I was like, what is this? Just completely clueless.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
finding people to help me understand what my body was going through and understand the concept of your body holds on to trauma, and
Mm,
understand that I had lived like a lifetime in betrayal trauma, and not
sure.
knowing what that meant or how to work my way through it. So, like I said earlier, I'm just so thankful that there are
Mm,
people like you out in the world that are teaching people how to, and teaching people that we can control our future. That
for
empowerment
sure.
is so amazing. I would love to like shout it off the rooftops. Just, you can. I did it. You can. You can overcome these things. You can let them be the fuel that takes you forward as opposed to the darkness that covers you.
Yeah, cheers to that. Powerful. Yeah, and I think that's why, in my work, the very first step that we always take is looking at that hope piece. Because if we're in despair, if we're not believing that change is possible, then we're just going to get stuck and stalled out, right? Hope and belief in change is what allows us to actually move forward. And there are lots of reasons to, feel hopeless sometimes in this process. It is not easy. And there can be so many different challenges. Trauma, it turns into like, sometimes describe it like this big spaghetti ball of stuff. It's like, oh, I need to deal with, my nervous system. Oh, yeah. But then what about trusting other people? Oh, yeah. But then what about all this anger? And then, oh, yeah, there's that shame stuff too. And then what? Just like learning how to communicate and set boundaries. I'm like, yeah, there's just like the list is long, right? And it just is like, oh, you can, when you're looking at that big spaghetti ball mess of stuff, to want to just retreat and like go under the covers and say, oh, like there's just no way is really understandable. I've hit that place in my life, plenty of times. But one of the things that I really love about the work that I get to do with my clients, and something I think that I bring to the table that they appreciate, is that curriculum mind uh, really allowed me to start to think about order of operations. What do we need to do when in order to maximize healing? Because I think, therapy is an important stage in the work, and to be able to just go into a place and just sit down and like whatever is on your mind and on your heart, just spew it out and just release it and just talk. But when we want to get down to the brass tacks of like truly healing, there are ways in which maybe the thing that you're suffering and struggling with is relational. But if we don't have the foundations of nervous system, if we haven't cleared out that shame, if we haven't built in, some sense of confidence, then I can give you all the communication skills, till kingdom come, but it's just going to keep falling flat, and you're going to keep repeating the same patterning in the relationship because the core, things behind why that's going on haven't been dealt with. And so by taking, by really working over all these years to refine, 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 like what needs to come when, then it breaks things down for people in a very step by step way. It's like, okay, I just focus on this one piece. That's it. That's all I have to think about this week or 2 weeks. Great. We'll put that in place. And then we get to build in the next thing, trusting and knowing, like we're going to get to the other stuff there. And I think that just alleviates a lot of that pressure and confusion and the dauntingness that can be there when it comes to thinking about healing. Yeah.
I agree. definitely from my perspective, when I started therapy, and I should have started therapy a long time ago, I was like in the depths of my trauma. And I
Mm,
remember the first day that I met my therapist, I, basically introduced myself and shook her hand and said, "Okay, this is what's going on, and I just need you to tell me how to put all this stuff back in Pandora's box so I can just
mm,
lock it back up and I'll be good."
yeah.
Like that
Hmm.
was where my mind went with it. And she just kind of sat back and she's like, "I don't think I've ever had anybody say it like that." I said, "I just need pieces, chunks. I need something I can focus on
Yeah.
one step at a time. I don't want to come here for the next 2 years and talk about a lifetime. I need to
Hmm.
fix the broken parts of myself."
Wow. Love that.
And
Yeah.
so, what you do, really helps. Like you said, it kind of takes out that daunting, or it keeps your mind from constantly racing and trying to grab on to all the different things. And when you
Mm,
can just focus, it really helps you kind of stay in the now, stay present, stay focused with what you're trying to achieve. And that helped keep me out of the anxiety I was feeling. And it helped me stay out of the depression because I was here
sure.
focusing on what I could control right now.
Mm,
And for me, control
mhm.
was huge. Like I felt like I had lost all control of everything, my mind, my body, everything.
Right.
And I needed
Right.
to get that control back. And so that one piece at a time is very valuable for me.
Mm, yeah, I love that. Beautiful. Yeah, and I think when we start in the work, we are often in so much of the pain, but we really have to focus on that nervous system piece. Like that is number one. It One of my biggest pet peeves is when people go into therapy and they're asked to do like a whole inventory of their trauma, either on paper or even just to try to speak it out on like day session 1 or 2. I'm like, what are we doing here? That's crazy pants because one, you don't have any formed relationship with the therapist yet. There's no strong container, for trust. And you don't know what the person's nervous system is yet. And so to have them, go in and do all of that kind of inventory, awaken and enliven the trauma, which is going to dysregulate the nervous system, and then say, see you next week. Oh, it gets me going, Leanne. And so, we have to start differently. We have to really start with that nervous system regulation piece and get all of that in place and make sure that you have capacity and that you know how to work with your nervous system, how to attune to yourself, how to notice when you're starting to go into dysregulation and what to do to come out of that before we get anywhere near like actually doing like the trauma work, if you will. That just made a huge difference for me when I really shifted my lens and I thought about that first. Let me think about the injury and let me heal that and get the resources and the tools that I need for that piece first. And then that's going to support me in being able to actually go in because what I was experiencing in a lot of the work that I was trying to do is my system would literally kick me out. That's the other thing that happens is that it's going to cause you to bail on the process because it is too scary. It is too overwhelming. And probably the worst thing that can happen is that people start to blame and shame themselves, which we are so prone to do when we've experienced abuse. Like, what's wrong with me? I'm failing at this. See, I can't do this right. And so then it just becomes a place that's re traumatizing and generating more shame, which is the last thing that we really want to experience when we're trying to heal, right? So let's not do that. Yeah, let's approach it differently.
Yeah, for sure. I was very blessed with kind of stumbling upon an alternative holistic practitioner who she was an herbalist and she
Mm,
did massage and hypnotherapy. And
mm,
I, happened to go to an artist pop up in the city and it was in her parking lot. And
yeah.
so I went in and talked to her and, right away she was working with helping me with herbs to calm my nervous system down. So it was that one step at a time, one
Yeah.
step at a time. She wasn't trying to heal all my stuff or throw me into hypnotherapy when I wasn't ready for that.
Mhm, mhm.
Eventually, when I was, it was gold. But
Yeah.
I needed that slow for her to hear me, to listen to me, to see me, to, help me just get under control.
Mm-hmm.
And
Beautiful.
so,
I dig that.
yeah, I agree 100%. And the one thing, I really admire most about your work is how it challenges traditional approaches. Obviously, not just therapy, you take it a little step at a time. Can you talk a little bit more about how you've kind of disrupted those conventional
Mm-hmm.
models and why is it so important to survivors?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. I mean, I'm a rebel at heart. I've always been. So go against the grain. I've always done things in the reverse order. Let me go, kind of try this out before I go get the degree, these kinds of things. Yeah, coming into understanding myself as a disruptor was like a whole process. But what it ultimately means to me is that I when I was doing my master's in counseling psychology, I was intentional about or intending to become a marriage and family therapist. That was what I thought I was doing, right, when I started that program. But then, as I sat in on the classes and I was listening to kind of the frameworks and how people were talking about healing, it wasn't resonating. I remember very clearly being in like the legal ethics class and going, oh, I'm going to break that rule. Oh, I'm definitely going to break that rule. To break that rule. So like it just didn't line up like the ways, like the and so oh gosh, I've got to find a different approach. That was number one. But then what I also understood from the guinea pigs, round with these beautiful women who offered themselves to kind of explore with me, when we ended, every single one of them in one way or another said to me, one of the things that's been most impactful about this time together has been your willingness to be honest about your shit, about how you struggled with something, about what it really looked like for you to, be in like anxious attachment and freaking out about something, or having, a moment of dysregulation and, throwing everything out of the Tupperware drawer. True story. And I thought, okay, well, that's important then. The personal connection and being humble in the space of I'm just as human as everybody else here. And being able to say, I get that. And I know that I get, and not just say I get it, but to say I get it because this was the experience that I had. And traditional therapy routes, I think things might be bending a bit in that realm, but when I was doing my work, which is, back in the early 2000s ish, and well, what was it, 2010 ish? Anyways, that was not the vibe. It was be very professional, be very disconnected, don't bring your stuff to the table, and I thought, oh, no, that's not going to work either. And then, as you can probably tell just from hanging out for me a little bit, I like to laugh. I like to have fun. And I was like, we need to have some play. And then the last piece of the puzzle for me was I wanted to be able to reach people broadly. I didn't like being kind of pigeonholed to only being able to work with people in my city, because I understand there are people in rural areas, there are people in other countries who do not have access, going back to the access conversation we were talking about earlier, like who just don't have the resources down the street, or even in the country. So I knew that I didn't want to be limited in that way. So when I kind of started, I did a group coaching uh, course. And I thought, oh, coaching. Okay, that's a different modality. That's a different approach. And I could not find anyone who was working with sexual trauma through the modalities of coaching. And in that kind of connection and relationship and being very relational and co-creating and conversational. So that's, really why I said, you know what, this whole therapy thing out the door for me. It's important. Again, I'm not knocking therapy. It is an important resource at a particular place in your process and in your healing. But for what I wanted to do and to be able to say to people, even the statement, trauma is not a life sentence, would cause people to lose their minds when I would say that back in the day. It's not quite as disruptive now, but boy, it was back then. Like people are starting to get it. But still today, I get pushback about that. Nope, you always are going to suffer. Nope, you're always going to have, like, whoa, like what is that? Like, why are we teaching people that? And big picture society, why I'm a disruptor is I really believe that a lot of that tracks back to like patriarchy and trying to keep women in their place. If we can keep women disempowered and forever suffering, then they can't excel, right? And we know that when women are unleashed, and I do work with men and other people as well, but I'm going to focus on that piece of the puzzle for just this moment. But when we start to push back against this idea that women have their place and they need to remain in that place, and we unleash them, oh my gosh, just look at what's happening in like all these countries who have women leaders, right? Unfortunately, not ours right now. One day, but there's just so much power in that. So I'm kind of for my own personal like edification, disrupting how this work is done because so that it will fit me and be edifying for me. But in the bigger picture, it is really about challenging the ways that we talk about and think about what it means to heal from abuse.
I'm right there with you. Oh my God, that's great. I was the same way when I was getting my certification for being a
Really?
health and life coach because they did the same thing. They're like, keep your distance, don't share your shit. Just, you're there to focus on them, but the people who were coming to me needed that connection. They needed to hear the different modalities that I used to help me, as well as empowering them to move forward. So I was the same
Mm-hmm.
way. And when I opened my practice, I had an office that I worked out of for 3 years, but I also did virtual coaching. Now
Mm-hmm.
I'm 100% virtual just because I can help so many more people all over the
Yeah.
world. I can help people from their car, from their place of work,
Isn't it wild?
from their couch. And I
It's
think
so cool.
that's what we need
Yeah.
to be able to do that. I do miss having an office and having that one-on-one personal connection, because when I opened my office, we were just coming out of the pandemic, and I did it
Mm,
for that reason because I knew people needed that connection, but they were also
right.
used to virtual. So it was like, oh
Yeah.
well, I'm going to be busy. Oh well, I can sneak out and take a lunch hour in my car. And I'm like, okay, we're just going to go
Yeah.
that direction, whatever works for them.
Sure, for sure. Yeah, it's really so beautiful how we can be so connected with people from all kinds of walks of life. And, I think ultimately, whether I'm working with, men, women, non-binary folks, trans folks, like the invitation is that we all have our place in the world. And the thing that pisses me off the most about abuse and trauma is that it robs a person of their intention in life, and that they begin to think of themselves, only through that lens of trauma, seeing themselves very small. And so, really, when I think about like the dots of beyond survivors all over the world, and then the trickle down effects of that, how a lot of my clients teach their children the tools. Because again, the tools are great lifestyle tools, right? It's all about crafting a new lifestyle and a different sense of self. And so when they share it with their friends or other family members or bring it in and kind of make it a part of their family culture, and that for me is what really just continues to spur me on. Like I feel like, I don't know if I'll see it in my lifetime, but like there's a tipping point, right? Where people are breaking generational trauma, right? And that if we get that collective energy of enough people breaking those kinds of chains, that we're really going to see again kind of that tipping point, and the balance will go towards these sorts of things happening, as opposed to it being a pandemic, which it is now, that it becomes, an epidemic, and then it becomes something that we hardly ever see. It's a big thought, it's a big dream, but I think every little drop in the bucket helps move us towards that.
Absolutely. I want to touch on, you talked about it a little bit before, but the neuroscience side of it. Uh,
Yeah.
can you explain how understanding the brain, which is what you have focused on, and its responses to trauma, how can that empower survivors to heal?
Yeah. Well, your brain has very clear mechanisms and policies and procedures, if you think about it that way. And it doesn't often deviate from those policies and procedures unless you learn how to intentionally interrupt or intervene in that process. So, one of the first things that I began to understand about the neuroscience of trauma is that when we have had chronic trauma, repetition of trauma and abuse, that parts of the brain just start to sit and live in that state of dysregulation. Like the thalamus, the part of your brain that's responsible, as like I call it like the bouncer of your brain. It really sits, imagine it at the door where everything is first entering through all the data, all the information around you, sight, sounds, smells. So the thalamus is in charge of doing that first look. Okay, that first look of danger, not danger. It's really just trying to assess, is this thing, coming at me going to hurt me? Is that smell a signal that I should, run and get away? So when you've had chronic trauma, the thalamus just kind of becomes a scaredy cat and is like, that's dangerous, that's dangerous, that's dangerous, that's dangerous. So that awareness, that understanding helped me to start to understand this concept of hypervigilance. Oh, that's what's happening, right? Rather than just this big word that I couldn't really connect to. Like, I know how I'm feeling, like everything is like on fire all the time, but why? Oh, because that part of my brain is misinterpreting the signals around me. Okay, cool. So now I can work with my thalamus and I can start to retrain that part of my brain to be a better assessor of risk and to better distinguish between danger, not danger. From there, the thalamus is sending that signal to the amygdala, and the amygdala is assessing that data. Like, is this really a threat? And if so, then how do I need to respond to keep this organism alive? That's one of the key jobs of the amygdala. And so it puts your system into a freeze state, even if it's just for a few seconds. It can be for minutes. In some contexts, like we can go for longer periods of time, and in the context of dissociative identity disorder, we can go for very long times and even have switches. So the amygdala then is also like overactive. Again, it's constantly sitting. So this is how we understand like things like functional freeze. My system actually is in a state of dysregulation all of the time, but yet I'm for that resilience sometimes, like I'm able to press past that. But holy moly, that takes a lot of energy, right? So then if I can start to teach my amygdala to literally like turn off sometimes, could you just chill out, right? We don't need to be in freeze, fight, flight all the time. Then I can reclaim that energy, and other parts of my brain are going to then function more easily, like my prefrontal cortex. So my focus, my motivation, my organization, my hippocampus, my ability to remember. And I could say, I could go on for hours, so I'm going to wrap it up. But I will say one fascinating thing that I learned that so put things into perspective for me was I had a lot of gaps in my memory, right? Okay, I can remember going out onto the porch and I remember this happening, but then there's a whole blank space. And then I remember getting up and going to my parents' bedroom, right? And then, repeat that times 1,000 for all the other experiences. And it was destabilizing for me because it felt like parts of the story weren't there. So what do I trust? What do I not trust? Is this really real? Maybe I'm making the whole thing up if I can't really actually fill in all the blanks. And when I understood that one of the things that's happening when we're being abused neurologically is that the amygdala is flooding the system, and it literally kind of shuts off other parts of the brain that aren't necessary for survival, one of those being the hippocampus, which is like your note taker of your brain. And so as I sometimes say, it's like the hippocampus is like, I'm not writing that shit down. No, 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 I'm not writing it down. And so when I realized that, oh, okay, that's what's going on there. There are moments during these experiences where my system was so overwhelmed that survival was the only priority, and the hippocampus was not there to kind of take note of those, micro moments or those other details. Captured some of it, but not all of it. It really helped me to just come into that validation of my experience and to release all of that kind of fear and confusion around it. So, yes, again, I could say a million other things, but it is for me just one of the easiest ways to understand if this is how my brain functions and when it's not about me, it's just my brain doing what my brain is meant to do. But I can heal parts of the brain that have been impacted by trauma. And more importantly, I can learn how to put my hands on the steering wheel, right? Because that's the other experience we have, right? It feels like it's just this thing that just grips us, hooks us, and then just takes us on a ride. And then here we are off into all kinds of different feelings, memories, all that stuff. So learning how to use interventions to feel like you have agency. And once I got that, Leanne, everything changed because I recognized, wait a second, I'm not at the mercy of all of this. I have so much power and so much choice. And everything changed once I came to understand that and learned how to do that.
Oh, 100%. 100%. I, I remember the first time that I actually felt that for myself.
Yeah.
I automatically assumed I was going to jump right into anxiety, fight, flight. And when it didn't hit, it was because I was already using those modalities that I have built over time. And I was like, huh, it didn't happen. Okay, cool. I'm like, it's working. All these things that I'm learning are working.
Yeah.
So that was
Beautiful.
wonderful. And I just want to say, the couple of workshops that I've taken from you, how you explain all of this, how you explain the brain, um, your slides. I mean, everything is just, it's in a way that's very ingestible and understanding because, words like amygdala and hippocampus, those can be really big words. And so understanding them kind of like your things look like cartoons. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
I get the
That's
note.
the elementary teacher in me.
I loved it. That worked
Yeah.
for me. That helped my brain understand those parts of my brain.
Makes
So,
me happy.
just throwing it out there for people who are looking for that education, it was very valuable to me. And I
Cool.
definitely
Thank you for
want to shift over to your education and the
that.
programs you offer. Um,
Okay.
so your programs really focus on moving beyond surviving to truly thriving, which is where we all want to get. For someone who is listening who might feel really stuck in their pain, what's one of the first steps that you recommend to kind of start that shift?
Mm. Get the lay of the land because understanding the roadmap is going to be important. And when we feel lost in the wilderness, the first thing we need is a compass. And so, understanding what are the stages of healing, what are the goals and intentions of each of those stages, and then what are the types of resources that are going to best support you. Because oftentimes, the reason why people feel stuck is because they're at like the victim stage, but they're accessing resources that would be great for somebody who's at the survivor stage, or they're getting stuck in the survivor stage because they're not moving into the resources and supports that would help them move into what I call beyond surviving and the action oriented step of the healing. And so the checklist that we're going to share with you all today is going to help you understand that framework. It doesn't mean that it's literally like this. It's not a fully linear process. You can be in more than one stage at a time, but overall, people are usually dominantly in one place or the other. And so having that deeper understanding and being able to understand where you should be putting your attention, and again, the kind of support that is going to best align with you where you're at so that you'll get supported rather than re-traumatized or pressed or frustrated. And then that helps you move in to the next stage. So we're going to share that checklist with you all today. And that's also going to help you, start to generate some hope and get connected into the possibility, like just knowing like, okay, this is the landscape. This is what's ahead of me is, I think, very motivating. Mm-hmm.
It was very helpful to me. I really enjoy, you have it as the three stages of healing from childhood abuse. And that was really helpful for me to to just learn and focus and understand that I could be in more than one place.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I'm looking forward to sharing that with our audience. There will be information on that in the show notes. So make sure you stick around and pick up that amazing free gift from Rachel. Um, I want to talk a little bit about how you help dispel the myth of being broken, because I know so many of us really feel that we're broken or we've done something wrong or we're unfixable or unlovable. So, how do you help them kind of dismantle those beliefs and begin to see themselves as whole again?
All of that comes from misplaced shame and responsibility. And when we're able to flip the script and my clients are able to see that the person who is broken is the person who made the choice to be abusive, everything changes.
That knowledge really helped me, as well as
Mm,
understanding, like, for me, it was understanding why the person did what they did based
mm,
on what they knew or what happened to them.
mm,
Because
yeah.
I was able to experience, when I get in trouble, my mom would ship me off to my grandparents. And so I could see from that perspective as a child being in my grandparents' house where that abuse came from.
Yeah.
I got to
Right.
see both the physical abuse and the sexual abuse. Like, it was clear as day. And so when years later, mine got so extreme that I really realized I had to take the time to realize why my mother was the way she was, because that's all she knew. And so I'm like you,
Mhm.
I want to be one of those people that break that generational chain. And I
Right.
want to help other
Yeah.
people break that generational chain. And I started with my children. You know,
Right.
I made that choice from the beginning. And even if it was just like,
Mhm.
I am not going to be my mother.
Heck yeah. I hear that. Yeah, I mean, it's so important. It isn't to discount the feeling of that. Like, I really understand that feeling, being separate, being different, being odd, being somehow not like the others. That was such a strong feeling for me, even just, a few days after the abuse started. I remember sitting down and playing with my little friends, and things felt different. I was like, I'm not as interested even in the things that we're playing or talking about, because in my mind I was like, don't you understand there's like really bad shit that can happen? And of course, lo and behold, many of those girls were being abused as well, unfortunately. But I didn't know that at the time because we didn't talk about it. And I think that when we can see it as I have been hurt, I have been harmed, I have been injured, and it is, I think, kind of a part of the process of acceptance that while we are not the ones that cause the energy in sorry, we are not the ones who cause the injury, we have to be the ones to repair it. And that's kind of shitty, isn't it? Right? And sometimes that's where people get stuck too, because they're like, that feels really unfair and that feels really yucky. And I just want to rebel against that. And I don't want to have to be the one to come in here and, do the work. But if we can flip that and see, well, actually, what that means is that my life is in my hands now. I wasn't at choice about what happened to me, but I am 100% at choice about what I do about it and how I respond. And so I can either see myself as just this, broken mess of a person who has no hope and no reason and, is never going to have the things that, they want in their life, or I can shed that, challenge that, and tap into my power, tap into my choice, and go out there and really create the life that I love. Like, it's truly available. And yeah, there are things that have to happen. One of my colleagues, Irene Lyons, says something very provocative, which is everyone can heal, but not everyone will. And there's deep truth to that because people do surrender to the trauma. And then there are sometimes context and factors, right? We have to make sure we have accessibility for people, right? We have to have resources, community, and support. Like, all of those factors play a part, in somebody being able to heal. But we have a lot to say about that too, like a lot to say about what we do in that area as well. Does that make sense what I'm saying
Mhm.
there? Yeah,
Yeah,
cool.
absolutely. To me, it does. I want to touch before we get too much closer to the end of this
Mhm.
about your Beyond Surviving program. I definitely
Yeah.
want you to share about that. But real quick, what has been one of the most rewarding parts of that journey for you from 2007 to today?
Stop it. How am I going to answer that? There's just so many. I, y- I'll just say the first thing that popped into my mind, which is just every single person who I see heal and come through this work and discover themselves and go on to do the things that they want to do, whether that's, starting a business that they've been dreaming about, being in a relationship, starting a family, just feeling good in their own skin and feeling more empowered. I always think of it as a little bit of like an FU to my grandfather. It's very satisfying, right? Like this thing that could have taken me out, right? Could have really impaired, my life. Ultimately, it's been a source of understanding and perspective and empathy, and it allows me to connect with people in really deep, intentional ways. And I wasn't robbed of my humor. I stayed in the light, and just to be able to share that and to share people's journeys, uh, like what an honor it is that people get on a Zoom call with me as like almost a perfect stranger most of the time and like start to tell me about their lives and then let me into their lives and into their worlds and we get to journey together. Um, Gosh, that's just it's such a beautiful, wonderful thing. And then that it is a way that I get to also then support my life, right? That there's this exchange that I'm supporting them and they're supporting me, right? And that's just such a great energetic exchange and it's so impactful and so empowering. I just love it. Yeah.
That is absolutely the reward. I agree. It is for me as well, just to see people kind of take that information and become empowered and move
Yeah.
forward. And then, periodically hearing from somebody months down the road or a year down the road and come back and just reiterate what that whole process was for them and how empowering
Yeah.
it was to have somebody to help walk beside them.
Hmm.
And, it just, yeah, that is definitely the rewarding side. How can people work with you?
Amazing. So kind of two pathways. You can explore and get kind of a like kind of dip your toe in, looking at my work and how I approach this with my 28-day boot camp for the brain. So that's a self-study program, and you can access all of these things on my website. Or if you really want to dive deep and you want to get some of that one-on-one support through the Beyond Surviving program, it's an 8-month program. All the details are on the website as far as what's included. And the first step towards that would be to apply for a Discover Your Genuine Self session. The link to that is on my website, and you can fill out this brief form, gives me a little bit of a sense of kind of where you're at in your journey, what you're hoping to get support around. And then we'll have a free consultation so that I can learn more about you and where you're at, what you're hoping to achieve. And then so I can really determine how I can best be of service to you. That might be the Beyond Surviving program, or it might be something else, but my job is at first pass to just get in there and see where you're at and help you map out a path forward. Whether that's accessing my free resources like my monthly drop-in group, again, the 28-day boot camp, or, going full in with the Beyond Surviving program. So yeah, don't hesitate, reach out, connect with me there, and we'll get you going.
That's great. And I did do your 28-day boot camp. I really enjoyed it. I took a lot from it. I talk about it a lot, and I try to, use you as a referral source because I know that there's a lot that can be learned from just that 28-day boot camp. But all of your other stuff is amazing. Your monthly things and the different workshops that you put on. They're so valuable.
A lot happening over here in Beyond Surviving. Yes, we have a Facebook group, we have a podcast, we have a YouTube channel, we have monthly, or bi-monthly trainings through Thrive Tribe. master classes through CPTSD Foundation. So long story, there are so many wonderful ways to just get locked in and to tap in regardless of kind of where you're at, what you're looking for. So come explore, come connect, let's hang.
Love
And
it.
thank you, Leanne, I'm so glad, absolutely for participating in the 28-day program and for sharing that. And yeah, just really appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you again, Rachel, for sharing your wisdom, sharing your story, sharing your heart and hope with all of us today. For those listening, if you would like to learn more about Rachel's work or connect with her, you can visit her on her website, which is rachelgrantcoaching.com. I will include that in the show notes. Make sure you grab a copy of her book, Beyond Surviving: The Final Stage in Recovery from Sexual Abuse. Do you have any parting words?
Well, first of all, love and appreciation for you, Leanne. So glad that we have connected and we're going to continue to collaborate and continue to explore other things together. For those of you listening, if you didn't hear anything else that I said today, again, please know that this is not a life sentence. You have so much freedom to create the life that you really want to live and to take the experiences that were meant for harm and to turn them on their head and thrive and live the best life that you really want to live. So don't give up, stay hopeful, stay engaged, keep taking the littlest next step because they all matter. And for sure, if there's any way that I can be a resource or support to you, I'm here. Reach out, don't hesitate.
Thank you so much. And thank you to our listeners. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Happiness on Tap podcast. Remember, no matter your past, healing and happiness are always within your reach. And until next time, take care.